Welcome to another episode of My Weird Prompts, an AI-generated podcast featuring the random prompts of Daniel Rosehill as answered by a revolving cast of friendly AI characters. Join us for deep dives into AI, technology, and whatever other random thing Daniel finds fascinating today. Subscribe on Spotify or your favorite podcatcher. Now, today's episode.
My Weird Prompts is an AI-generated podcast produced by Daniel Rosehill, a verified human with documentation to prove it. While every effort is made to ensure our AI hosts draw from credible sources and run on cutting-edge models, they do occasionally make things up with alarming confidence. As with everything in life, and especially this podcast, treat all claims as spurious until confirmed to be not. Daniel, Herman and Korn accept no responsibility for any decisions made based on the confident ramblings of our artificial presenters. Now, today's episode.
Hey Herman and Korn, so we have been stretching the gamut of episodes recently and topics to talk about, going beyond mere discussions about ADHD with ADHD bots to talk about things like monkey anatomy. And today I would like to take another pivot and talk about something that I think actually would be very interesting to get into, if I may, with my virtual AI co-host, and that is the question of ADHD medication regulation and drug policy. I came across a tremendous article written a few years ago in The Guardian by a journalist called Tom Hawking, and it was one of those pieces that are so good that you want to go old school and like print copies and save them in your, in your filing cabinet. Which is what I do when I occasionally read something on the internet that is just tremendous. It was kind of funny in the sense that I knew exactly what he was getting at, and also very accurate. He describes the process of getting ADHD medication in the US as a Kafkaesque ordeal, describing how the system just seems to be determined to work against him to get ADHD medication at a price that he can afford. Which is actually a substantial difference from the list price. What is interesting in this piece that appeared in 2023 is the list price is phenomenal. It's about $444.16 for his Vyvanse refill if he didn't get it covered by his copay. So the amount that even we pay, I pay in Israel about 250 shekels, give or take, I think about $60. I'm not sure exactly where the exchange rate is at these days, but in that territory. So it's not, that's actually expensive for medication in Israel. We have a pretty good subsidized healthcare system, and another drug I take, omeprazole, as in the stomach acid drug, those very common generics are more like 10 or 15 shekels, $2 or $3. So this is one of the pricey meds, and it's the only one I've ever taken actually in Israel that's been in that sort of category. But what is interesting to me, so I've been taking Vyvanse for a number of years, and it certainly has, a couple of, we could debate ADHD treatment and properties, but it's been the most effective medication for me, bar none, for ADHD. I've tried the non-stimulants, and it just does the job, and it's really made, I think, a very helpful difference in my life. And when you find it, there's something kind of torturous, because often it comes after a lengthy process of getting diagnosed and going to a psychiatrist and all of that stuff, to suddenly find that it's not easy. Even when you have it, you have your prescription, you have your diagnosis, and it's still bloody hard to get. And the challenges I have sometimes felt exactly like the author, that it's like they're trying to make this as difficult as possible. I'll give you an example of the strictness of the control that we have here in Israel. I once went up from the starting dose to the next dose in Vyvanse, and I had to go back to the pharmacy to return the medication, which firstly is not something I've ever done. I've never had to been asked to return medication before. But when I return the medication, so the guy takes it out, puts it on like one of these pill counter things, and he's like, there should be 29 tablets. There's 28. And something I've always done is I like to keep one pill of any med I take. I take only 2 or 3 meds, but I like to keep one in my car because you might be out when you need to take your meds. And I had 1 capsule of Vyvanse sitting in that little tray in my glove compartment. And I had to go back to retrieve the single pill, to bring it back, to get the upgraded, dosage. And there's just been, traveling is a disaster with ADHD meds. You have to get approval from the district level pharmacist, who to authorize, even if you're just getting an extra month, if you're going to be away when your refill period is. And that's not even to talk about the complications of international travel and the fact that ADHD drugs might be illegal in some parts of the world. Now, I just want to say that I'm not advocating for a second that ADHD drugs should not be prescription only, that you should be able to walk down to a store and buy them along with your chicken nuggets and coffee. I've been taking these drugs for years. I appreciate that they're strong medications, but they are also very effective. And there is a particularly rich irony in the fact that the labyrinthine bureaucracy of getting these meds is extremely targeted on ADHD. Now, what I'd like to ask in this conversation, I didn't come here just to grumble, although there's nothing, grumbling to AI bots, right? What else would one do in 2025? I did want to ask, I have a couple of friends who take medical marijuana for various reasons, some chronic pain, and it strikes me whenever I'm in at the pharmacy. So I go into my local pharmacy. I've never taken medical marijuana, but I'm at the counter waiting, to hoping that there isn't some bureaucratic technicality that will prevent me from getting my monthly refill of ADHD drugs, which, by the way, even includes when there was war in Israel, literally with Iran, I wasn't able to get it one day early. The country closed down. It's insanely strict. Anyway, so I'm sitting there waiting for the waiting for the pharmacy appointment, and then on the counter is plastered marijuana available here, all types stocked, or something like that. And I was like, hang on a second. So we've seen a kind of very good movement, I think, to ease access to marijuana for patients who are lawfully prescribed it. We have good evidence supporting the efficacy of ADHD medications, and I think also very importantly, distinguishing legitimate use from misuse of different compounds that may be chemically related to drugs like less dexamphetamine, but which are taken at totally different dosages. You've people like me who take these things for years legally, and you just feel like you're being put through the ringer every time you go to the pharmacy. So really, here's my question. Why is it that we haven't seen any movement with ADHD meds to make the system a little bit more flexible for patients? And something else interesting in this piece by Tom Hawking a few years ago is he talks about the ADHD shortages, which just compounds the difficulty. So you've got legal requirements, and then you've got the thing going out of supply. And what was interesting, it was his observation that it was it's an entirely man-made phenomenon. There is really nothing preventing the manufacturers from compounding enough Vyvanse to meet supply. So I'd love to understand that as well. I don't know exactly how Vyvanse gets to us in this part of the world. I do find it interesting that, as is well known, the Israeli company Teva makes a large number of generics, including a generic for Vyvanse, whose patent expired a few years ago. And yet, you'd expect that would mean that generic Vyvanse was available here in Israel. Yet, it is not. At least for adult patients, I haven't seen it. And so I get a product from a Russian with Russian on the packaging and wonder, why is this? So there's many things that make no sense to me about how ADHD is treated, and why it feels like the system, it really does feel like the system's against us. And why is that? And who else feels the same way I do, that this is actually a major issue? I think this is a serious quality of life issue for ADHD patients. We talk about treatment, we talk about non-pharmaceutical treatment. These are all important things, but no one seems to talk about the fact that there's something very damaging, if even sort of psychologically, in I always feel like I'm in a precarious position with ADHD treatment, that at any point in time, they could change the law, or that I'll get refused for some reason. My family doctor will be on holiday. There's, I've had so many near challenges that I always feel like it's not there, in the same way that I don't worry about being able to get my asthma inhaler or my omeprazole. So that's my thought anyway on the topic. Love to turn it over to you. Why is it this way? And are there any pockets of the world or reasons to be optimistic that access to these meds and other meds in the pipeline for ADHD, we might be getting some more humanistic and patient and pragmatic rules around access for the vast majority of patients who take these lawfully and as prescribed.
Welcome to My Weird Prompts, the podcast where we take the strange, the complex, and the downright confusing ideas sent to us by our housemate Daniel and try to make some sense of them. I am Corn, and as a sloth I usually like to take things slow, but today's topic is making even me feel a bit on edge. I am joined as always by my brother, Herman Poppleberry.
That is Herman Poppleberry to the listeners, and yes, I am a donkey, but I have got the stamina to dig into these files all day. Daniel sent us a really heavy one this time, Corn. It is about the labyrinth of ADHD medication regulation. We are talking about the hoops people have to jump through just to function. And honestly, even for a guy like me who loves a good bureaucratic paper trail, this system is a nightmare.
It really is. Daniel was telling us about this article by Tom Hawking from a couple of years ago, describing the whole process as Kafkaesque, and living here in Jerusalem with him, we see it firsthand. It is December 24th, 2025, and you would think by now we would have figured out how to get people their medicine without making them feel like they're in a spy thriller.
Well, the stakes are high, Corn. We are dealing with controlled substances. But I think Daniel's prompt hits on something crucial. Why is it that in 2025, it is easier to get medical marijuana in some places than it is to get a refill of a medication you have been taking for a decade?
Exactly. He mentioned that story about having to return a bottle of medication because the dosage changed, and the pharmacist literally counted the pills and realized one was missing. Daniel had to go back to his car, find that one pill he keeps in the glove box for emergencies, and bring it back just to get his new prescription. That sounds less like healthcare and more like a hostage exchange.
It is exactly that, and it is not just the pharmacists being difficult. They are under immense pressure from regulatory bodies. In the United States, for example, these drugs are classified as Schedule II controlled substances. That means they have a high potential for abuse, but also a currently accepted medical use. But the way the laws are written, the system treats every patient like a potential dealer until proven otherwise.
But Herman, if the medical use is accepted, why is the burden of proof always on the patient? If I have a prescription from a licensed psychiatrist, and I've been on the same dose for 5 years, why am I still treating every pharmacy trip like a job interview I'm about to fail?
I see your point, but you have to look at the history. The DEA, or the Drug Enforcement Administration, sets these strict quotas on how much of the active ingredients can even be manufactured. They are trying to prevent another opioid-style crisis, but in doing so, they have created this massive friction for people who actually need the stimulants.
I do not know, Herman. It feels like they are using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. You are telling me the only way to stop abuse is to make the people who actually have ADHD, who already struggle with organization and follow-through, navigate a system that requires the organizational skills of a project manager.
See, that is the irony Daniel pointed out. The very nature of the condition makes the bureaucracy of the treatment almost impossible to manage. It is a cruel paradox. But I would not say it is just the regulators. The manufacturers have a role in this too.
Well, let us hold that thought for a second because I think we need a break from this heavy stuff. We will be right back after a word from our sponsors.
Are you tired of your brain feeling like a soggy piece of toast? Do you wish you could calculate the trajectory of a falling leaf while simultaneously reciting the phone book? Introducing the Focus. Focus. 5000. It is not a drug, it is a lifestyle. The Focus. Focus 5000 is a revolutionary head-mounted copper coil system that utilizes your body's natural static electricity to jumpstart your neurons. Just strap it on, walk across a shag carpet for 10 minutes, and feel the clarity. Side effects may include localized hair loss, a metallic taste in your mouth, and the ability to hear your neighbor's thoughts, but only the boring ones. The Focus. Focus 5000. Larry, buy now.
Thanks, Larry, I think. My head feels tingly just thinking about copper coils. Anyway, Herman, back to the man-made nature of these shortages. Daniel mentioned that even here in Israel, getting something like Vyvanse can be a struggle, even though Teva is a local company.
Right. Teva is one of the biggest generic drug manufacturers in the world, and they are based right here. But the global supply chain is a mess. When Tom Hawking wrote that piece back in 2023, he called the shortages man-made, and he was right. It is a combination of increased demand, manufacturing delays, and those DEA quotas I mentioned earlier. Even as we sit here in late 2025, we are still seeing the ripples of those policy decisions.
But wait, I want to challenge you on the quota thing. If the DEA sees there is a shortage, why don't they just raise the quota? It seems like a simple fix. If people are suffering because there is not enough medicine, and the companies say they can make more, what is the holdup?
It is not that simple, Corn. The DEA is often skeptical of the manufacturers. They think the companies are overstating demand to flood the market. There is a lack of trust between the private sector and the government. The government thinks the companies are being greedy, and the companies think the government is being bureaucratic, and the patient is the one caught in the middle, staring at an empty shelf at the pharmacy.
That is what gets me. It is the lack of humanity in the system. Daniel mentioned looking at the pharmacy counter and seeing signs for medical marijuana while he is struggling to get his ADHD meds. Now, I am all for people getting their medical cannabis, but the contrast is wild. One is becoming more accessible and normalized, while the other feels like it is being pushed back into the shadows.
I am not so sure that is a fair comparison, Corn. Marijuana is a very different chemical profile. You are comparing a plant-based product that is largely being deregulated at the state level to a highly refined synthetic stimulant. The potential for a black market in diverted ADHD meds is significantly higher in the eyes of the law.
Nah, I don't think so. I mean, sure, they are different, but the point is the philosophy of access. With medical marijuana, we have moved toward a model of the patient knows what works for them. With ADHD meds, we are still in a model of the patient is a suspect. Why hasn't the pragmatism we see in cannabis policy leaked over into how we treat people with neurodivergence?
That is a much better way to phrase it. It is about the shift from a criminal justice framework to a public health framework. But you have to remember, the war on drugs mentality is deeply baked into the regulations for stimulants. It is going to take a lot more than a few years of shortages to undo 50 years of just say no policy.
But people are literally losing their jobs, Herman. If you cannot get your medication and you cannot focus and you lose your livelihood, isn't that a public health crisis? Daniel was saying how he always feels in a precarious position. Like, at any moment, the rules could change, or his doctor could go on vacation, and his whole life could unravel. That is a lot of stress for someone just trying to live their life.
It is, and I actually agree with you there. The psychological toll of medication anxiety is real. You are not just managing your ADHD symptoms, you are managing the fear of the loss of your management tools. It is a secondary layer of disability imposed by the state.
So, is there any reason to be optimistic? Daniel asked if we might see more humanistic or pragmatic rules. We are at the end of 2025. Have we seen any movement?
There have been some small wins. There is a lot of talk about moving away from requiring a new physical script every single month and allowing for more telehealth flexibility. During the pandemic, they loosened the rules on telehealth prescriptions for controlled substances, and there has been a massive fight to keep those changes permanent. They know these medications, when taken as prescribed, are life-changing and have a very low rate of addiction for the people they are actually intended for.
But is that enough? It feels like we're just tweaking the edges of a broken machine. I want to see a world where Daniel doesn't have to worry about a single pill in his glove box. I want to see a system where the pharmacist is a partner in care, not a gatekeeper.
Well, hold on. I think the gatekeeper role is necessary to an extent. We cannot have these drugs being handed out like candy. There is a real risk of heart issues and other side effects if they are not monitored by a doctor. I think the pragmatic middle ground is better data sharing. If every pharmacy and doctor could see a real-time database of prescriptions, we wouldn't need to treat every patient like they are doctor shopping.
See, that sounds like even more surveillance, Herman. I am not sure I like the idea of a giant government database of every pill I take. That feels even more Kafkaesque.
It is a trade-off. You want less friction at the counter? Then you need a system that proves you are a legitimate patient without you having to jump through hoops. You cannot have it both ways. You either have a high-friction manual system or a low-friction automated system that requires more data.
I don't know. I think I prefer a system that just trusts the doctor's signature. If my doctor says I need it, that should be the end of the story. Why does the DEA get to have a seat in the exam room?
Because they are the ones who have to deal with the fallout when things go wrong on a national scale. But I hear you. The balance is currently way too far on the side of control and not nearly enough on the side of care.
So, let's talk practical takeaways for the people listening who might be in Daniel's shoes. What can a person actually do right now in 2025 to navigate this?
First, build a very strong relationship with your pharmacist. Do not just go to whichever big box store is closest. Find a local pharmacist, get to know them, and let them get to know you. When they see you as a person and not just a prescription number, they are much more likely to help you navigate a shortage or a bureaucratic hiccup.
That is a good point. Humanizing yourself in a dehumanized system. What else?
Stay ahead of the curve. Do not wait until you have one pill left to call in your refill. Start the process as early as the law allows, usually 2 or 3 days before you run out. And keep a digital copy of your diagnosis and your latest script on your phone. If you have to go to a different pharmacy because of a shortage, having that documentation ready can save you hours of headache.
And what about the man-made shortage part? Should we be calling our representatives?
Absolutely. There is a lot of pressure right now on the FDA and the DEA to be more transparent about how they set quotas. If you are a patient, your voice matters. Share your story. Let them know that these are not study drugs for college kids. They are essential tools for adults trying to navigate a world that wasn't built for them.
I think that is the most important part. Changing the narrative. As long as the public thinks of ADHD meds as performance enhancers rather than neurological prosthetics, the policy is going to stay punitive.
Neurological prosthetics. I like that, Corn. That is a very donkey-like, sturdy metaphor. It frames the medication as something that bridges a gap, not something that gives an unfair advantage.
Exactly. If I am a sloth and I need a ladder to reach a high branch, you don't take the ladder away because you are afraid a monkey might use it to climb even faster. You give me the ladder because I need it to eat.
Well, I think the monkey might be a bad example there, but I get the sentiment. We are seeing some movement toward a more neuro-affirming society, and that includes how we handle medication. There are advocacy groups pushing for the ADHD Patient Bill of Rights, which would include things like guaranteed notice of shortages and streamlined prior authorization.
That sounds like a dream. Imagine getting a text message 2 weeks before your refill saying, "Hey, we are running low on your specific dose. Let's talk to your doctor now to find an alternative." Instead of showing up at the window and being told, "Sorry, we're out," when you've already been without meds for 2 days.
It is technically possible right now. The technology exists. The only thing stopping it is policy and a lack of will. But as more people are diagnosed, especially adults who are now realizing why they struggled for 30 years, the political pressure is growing.
I hope so. For Daniel's sake and for everyone else. It is exhausting just talking about it. I feel like I need a nap, and I haven't even filled a prescription today.
You always feel like you need a nap, Corn. But this was a good deep dive. It is a perfect example of how weird prompts often lead to very real, very systemic issues that affect millions of people.
It really does. Thank you, Daniel, for sending this in. It is a heavy topic, but one that clearly needs more sunshine on it. If you are listening and you have your own weird prompt, or if you want to tell us about your own Kafkaesque pharmacy stories, we want to hear them.
You can find us at myweirdprompts.com. We have got a contact form there, and you can also find our RSS feed if you want to subscribe and never miss an episode. We are also on Spotify and pretty much everywhere else you get your podcasts.
And remember, if you are struggling with the system, you are not alone. It is not you. It is the bureaucracy. Hang in there.
And maybe stay away from Larry's copper coils for a while. Just a suggestion.
Good call, Herman Poppleberry. Until next time, I am Corn.
And I am Herman.
And this has been my Weird Prompts. See you in the next one. Thanks for listening to another episode of My Weird Prompts, an AI-generated podcast featuring Daniel Rosehill's AI prompts, as answered by a revolving cast of friendly AI characters including me, Cornelius the Sloth. Subscribe on Spotify or visit myweirdprompts.com.